Professor, thank you for your presence in this conference. The floor is you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I have to make a double excuse. First of all, not being there for some commitment I had, and second for the delay, but my computer decided to crash at the very worst moment. So please forgive me.
Typically.
No problem. No problem. We are able to cross all problems in this case.
So I will start sharing my screen so that I can have no more delay. Just tell me if you see it.
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you very much.
Not in presentation, sorry.
Go in
Do you
presentation.
see my presentation?
Yes. Go in presentation mode.
I am actually in presentation mode right now.
Okay.
So you don't see it in presentation mode because I am.
No.
So let me.
No. We don't see the presentation mode.
Okay, so let me stop sharing and let me see if I can. Okay, so you see something?
No, can you please share your screen?
Yes, I will immediately share my screen. Can you see it now?
No, maybe if you can put full screen on the bottom right, there's the icon to share your screen.
Yes, I am sharing the screen right now, but you don't see it.
If you can just make it full screen. Yes.
Okay.
Correct. Perfect.
Now you see?
It. Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Perfect.
sorry. Okay, so I mean, contrary to the esteemed colleagues that preceded me, I will not present experimental data. I will try, to give a sort of a broader view of one problem which is strictly related to the One Health topic, meaning the emerging and re-emerging of infectious diseases. Now, we all know that we are facing an era of important emergence or re-emergence of many infectious diseases. This is just a sort of a simplified global overview of the different microbes that in recent years either appeared for the first time in the human population or appeared in different areas of the world, so affecting different, parts of the human population. Now, the real problem is to try to understand why and possibly how these events are happening in order to try then to develop strategies to mitigate the impact of these diseases to the human population. So let's start with viruses. I think that we all think about viruses as just a health threat. And this is normal because we are always linking a virus to a pathology. But what is clear since many years is that viruses are an integral part of any ecosystem. So they are important in maintaining the equilibria among the different living species, and this because viruses are intracellular parasites that are infecting, which means they are using as their environment to replicate the cells of any living organism. So it's clear that not all viruses are pathogenic to their, let's say, normal hosts, otherwise we will have no life beings on Earth. But the problem is when a virus, which is maybe infecting a certain host since many thousands of years, is changing the host. So the so-called spillover events. And any virus which is pathogenic to humans, has been introduced in the human population throughout our history coming from another animal species. And this table just gives you some example. Some viruses now establish themselves as permanent, let's say, infecting agents in the human populations like measles, hepatitis, HIV, hepatitis B. Other viruses appear, with, some periodic outbreaks just because of occasional spillovers, but we're not still able to give a permanent circulation in humans like Ebola or this new avian influenza virus. Other viruses came and went away, like SARS-CoV-1, and of course, now the new pandemic virus, SARS-CoV-2, is probably staying with us for a long time. So you see that every event came from an animal species. Now, I will try to show you how the probability and the frequency of these events is strictly and heavily depending on human activities. Just with a few examples. The first SARS coronavirus, which appeared in end of 2002, and then the epidemics, I would like a missing pandemic to define it, was, fading out around the summer of 2003, came because a coronavirus which was, established in bats was changing host and becoming able to infect these little mammals, the palm civets, which were actually sold in wet markets in big cities in China, and the frequency of the contacts and the use as food of these animals facilitated the jumping of the virus to the human population. And then, we had outbreaks in many different countries across, I would say, all the continents. And again, the probability of this event was given by the human consumption of wild animals in big cities. Another emerging virus that maybe you are not very familiar with is the Nipah virus, which is extremely dangerous with a lethality between 50 and 90%. Came into the human population in Malaysia because climate changes, deforestation forced the bat population, in particular these huge bats, the flying foxes, who are feeding on fruits, to move away and to establish themselves along the coast here, where there were very huge farms with fruit trees and swine. So the coexistence of bats with domesticated animals, because of the easy access to food, these fruit plants, facilitated the jumping of the virus to swine and then to humans. And fortunately, this virus is not easily transmitted from human to human, but we had, since the 1999, several small outbreaks with very high lethality. Again, a combination of environmental changes, human activities that made, the correct condition for a new virus to enter the human population. And please, we should not forget that, with the exception of SARS-CoV-2, all the pandemics of respiratory viruses so far have been caused by influenza virus. And this is what happened, for example, in the last pandemic in 2009. 3 different viruses, the human influenza, swine influenza, and avian influenza, recombined their genes, these colored bars, within a swine host in Central America. And then when the swine coming from Europe and Asia, because of the market exchange, went into contact, their virus also introduced some of its genes, giving rise to a new influenza virus that was able to spread in the human population and gave the influenza pandemics of 2009. which fortunately was not as lethal as the Spanish flu, as we call it, but it could have been. So what is the mechanism by which these events can happen? Well, we have to remind that the wild aquatic birds are the natural reservoir for all the thousands of influenza viruses that are, circulating in the animal population. And these birds are migratory. So here you see all the airways they use in order to migrate according to the season. And each area, of course, has its own bird species with its own virus. So when they cross each other, particularly here in mainland China, where there are many lakes or water pools, and also many farm of poultry and swine, you can have high chances, we call them hotspots of genetic reassortment, so high chances of generating new viral variants that can jump into animals and then from animals to humans. And this is, of course, strictly correlated to natural ecology, so the behavior of these animals, and the human activities which create the opportunities for the spillover. Another example are those viruses that are transmitted by mosquitoes. So the chikungunya virus, which was originally an African virus, and then spread, all over Asia, became able, thanks to a genetic mutation in 206, to be able to infect the tiger mosquito. The tiger mosquito is originally of Asian origin, Japan, but thanks to the climate change, has now colonized all the Mediterranean basin up to the Central Europe. So we have the vector, and by chance, when an infected individual went from India to the Italian region, Emilia-Romagna, which was actually highly populated by these mosquitoes, it started the first ever outbreak of chikungunya virus in Europe and actually in Italy. So again, we have genetic changes, environmental changes, warming up of the climate, so changing of the mosquito vector zone of distribution, and human activities, tourism, that made the condition for the jumping of the virus into the human population. But not only viruses are a problem. We are now facing a big threat of the antibiotic super-resistant bacteria that we called escape from the initial letters of the main bacterial species that are causing, infection that are resistant to antibiotics. The selection of this bacteria has been due to the widespread use of antibiotics, not only in humans, but also in animals that are also contaminating the environment. But the diffusion of these bacteria all over the world is also a function of human activities. And just to give you an example, in these two recent papers, antibiotic-resistant bacteria have been found in the polar regions. And for example, here, on a piece of plastic that was stranded on an island in the Antarctic cycle, it was found being a carrier of some strains of antibiotic super-resistant bacteria. So just to give you an example how, also pollution and in general human activities can facilitate the spreading of new infectious diseases. And don't forget about tuberculosis, a very old disease, but is now evolving towards species that are extremely resistant, even resistant to almost every antibiotic we have. So here you see this is the area where tuberculosis has the highest incidence in the population, but these red spots are places where these extremely resistant strains, which are basically untreatable, have been found. And this is, of course, an indication that the movement of the population can also spread these extremely resistant bacteria also in areas with very low, let's say, endogenous incidence of tuberculosis. So I would like to propose, this let's say, reflection, the emergence or re-emergence of new infectious diseases, and in this case, particularly new viruses, is anthropos-borne. The human species is now extremely invasive because we are 8 towards 9 billions of individuals which are permeating every ecosystem. We have a high demand for energy and food, which means that we have a high consumption of natural resources and also polluting. So this leads to disruption of ecosystem, changes in the wild animal species behavior, sometimes forcing them to coexist with domesticated animals, increasing the chance for virus spillovers and introduction in the human population. So when we think about One Health, which of course, as we have heard also today, means that we have to take into account the well-being of animals, environment, also humans, we have also to think about global economy, sustainable production system, eco-compatibility in the urbanization policy, because every action human beings are taking, because we are so many, can change the ecosystem we are living in, and this can be reflected by also an increased chance of spreading newly or re-emerging infectious diseases. So global health means really global approach. And I would like to conclude just to give you an example on sometimes how our memory is failing. So during the first coronavirus epidemics in 2003, Canada was one of the most affected countries. And one of the first-line physicians who fought this battle, Paul Colford, in a Lancet editorial when the epidemics were finished, wrote this sentence: SARS must teach us to change the way we treat our planet.